I want to begin this morning with a disclaimer of sorts. The Gospel of John often uses blindness as a metaphor for people who do not understand who Jesus is. Now, my father was blind, and I am aware that using a condition that so profoundly affected my father's life and other people's lives as a metaphor for faithlessness is problematic. But yet the people in this story, if you notice, who have perfectly functioning eyes do not see who Jesus is. So I hope we'll recognize that the vision-related language in this story is maybe not what we would use today, but I'm not going to rewrite the Gospel of John. So, for Jesus in John's Gospel, everything in the world is a sign that points to him. In John's Gospel, there aren't miracles that we have in the other Gospels. We just have signs. And the signs really aren't big deals on their own. Jesus spits on the ground and makes mud with his spit and puts it in the man's eyes. It's not a really fancy miracle, right? But it's about how the sign points to Jesus. Signs are events and actions that make our vision clearer and our hearing sharper, unless, of course, they don't. Because for many people in this story, the signs didn't improve their vision at all. The sign of a man having his sight restored does not fit in any way with the world they knew or could explain. It doesn't fit in a world we can explain, really. And as such, even though they're asking questions, they seem to be standing there like this, la 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 la, I'm not listening to you. What do we see when we look at Jesus? That's the question for John's Gospel. And here's my question for you. How do we be sure that we don't only see what we're already looking for? I think that second question is part of the problem with our current state of American culture. I think in both politics and in religion, our grand American experiment has been reduced to, again, excuse my language, blind faith. We have mistaken what belief could mean, which is mystery and wonder, and we have reduced it to an agreement with authority about truth. In Greek, though, the word for faith and the word for belief are the same word. So faith, which involves and invokes a level of mystery, is reduced to just asserting your allegiance to a belief system. And it's the shadowy side of belief systems that are the problem. Because when you have a belief system, I believe this, it puts you in opposition to people who believe that. People who see the world differently than you, who go to church in a different place, who worship differently, who vote differently, right? They end up being not you. And you see it functioning in this story and in John's Gospel because it's the kind of thing that helps keep a group together. In John's Gospel, the followers of Jesus were being kicked out of the synagogues by the religious leaders. So the power of saying, if you're not for us, you're against us, that can be really helpful language for a group that is under siege. A generation ago, the United States, what were we united about? Our hatred of communism, right? And it brought us together, partly in fear, partly in patriotism. But the Berlin Wall fell, and now we don't have a clear enemy. I don't think we realize how much we had defined ourselves in opposition to communism. It shaped our identity. There are still plenty of threats in the world today, but they're much more amorphous. It's easy to say we hate terrorism, but who counts as a terrorist is very much up for debate. Our belief systems put us in conflict with each other. You've seen it here this past month and this morning, right? When protesters a couple weeks ago were yelling at you as you entered worship. We may all be Christian in name, but our belief system is very different. We see it in politics, when people say that they're all in for their candidate, even if that candidate were to shoot somebody in the middle of the street. Of course, it's easier to see the blind faith of our opponents than it is to see our own, but it's true for all of us. Because we're worried that if we don't show complete loyalty to our party, flawed as it may be, we'll lose the election to the other guys, right? And then once you've decided the other guys are everything that's wrong with America, you have to fight to the death for your guy, even if he may be wrong with America, right? It's a bad cycle we're in. So listen to me now, everybody in this room. Each and every one of us is wrong about something that we're certain we're right about. Each and every one of us is absolutely wrong about something we're certain we're right about. We just don't know what it is because we're not looking for it. And I don't tell you that so you can go and help everybody else know what they're wrong about. Our work is to figure out our own stuff. What is a belief we've been stating as fact that we have gotten wrong? In the public square, in religion, our state of believing has ceased to be about common understanding and personal experience. It's become a discordant, clanging chorus where the loudest voices seem to win. But our story of the man born blind suggests that clear vision does not come from allegiance to a belief system. It doesn't come from being fixated on the how or the why questions that try to quantify or explain away or control the mystery of faith. Clear vision arrives for the man when he says, "I do not know." They ask him, and they ask him again about how he was healed. They want him to confirm what they think they already know. They are not interested in the idea that God could be at work in a way they don't understand. How did it happen? Who did this? What do you say about him? For the formerly blind man, when he acknowledges that he does not have one single clue, that's when he gets clear sight. That's when he understands. Yes, Jesus restored his vision, and you would think that being the recipient of one of Jesus' signs would be enough to bring people to faith, but that is rarely the experience of people in Scripture. For this man, it required his willingness to trust that he did not have all the answers so that he could see who Jesus truly was. "Lord, I believe," he says at the end of the story. So even when we have no answers to other people's questions, our faith is strongest when we can claim our doubts and questions and just testify to what we've experienced. And then we have to expect that people's questions and their anxieties are going to rise up when you invoke mystery. The crowd is so befuddled in this story, it doesn't even recognize the man when he comes back with his sight. He has to keep telling him, "It's me. Hi, I'm the blind guy. It's me." So then they ask him, "Fine, if you're the blind man, how do you see now?" But notice what he says. "This man called Jesus, he made some mud, he put it on my eyes. He said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' I went, I washed, I received my sight, bim, bam, boom," right? He testifies to his experience. He does not say everyone needs to have that same experience he did. He does not claim his experience is more valid than someone else's. He just says what he knows about what he experienced. Notice, he also does not tell everyone else that they have to go to Siloam to be healed. And he doesn't say that if you instead go to the pool at Bethsaida, that your healing will be inferior. He also does not try to market the mud and sell the Siloam experience so that everyone else will have the same healing he had for $49.95. He shares what he knows. He acknowledges what he doesn't know. But the crowd keeps wanting facts and data. I wish the crowd had instead asked him, "What did the mud feel like when he put it on your eyes? What is it like to see? Do dogs look like you imagined they would look? What do you think of sunsets?" Wouldn't that be great if instead of trying to quantify somebody else's experience, we could just enjoy it with them? What could our faith communities, think about it, what could our country be if we had more of that? But instead they take him to the Pharisees, who get very blinded by the technicality of the sign. Jesus made mud on the Sabbath. Now, this mud business doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but Pharaoh had the Israelites make mud into bricks. Remember that. Victor talked about it last week when he preached about Moses. Slavery in Egypt was a life-ending experience. It was not a learning experience. And there is great value in knowing your history and learning from it. There is no value in forgetting the parts of history you don't want to remember. But no matter how useful and beneficial those rules had been at the beginning, once the religious leaders have reduced their faith experience into just the rules, they missed an opportunity to see God at work making somebody's life better. Our traditions are important, and we can't let them close our eyes to the presence of God in our midst. Through the interrogation with the Pharisees, the formerly blind man doesn't get sidetracked. He just keeps talking about his experience and acknowledging when he doesn't have answers. And when pressed, he does make a claim about Jesus. He says he's a prophet. His awareness of Jesus seems to be getting clearer for him as it gets more and more muddied for the religious leaders. The man born blind continues to speak of his experience, and he's quite impassioned in his own testimony. Here's an astonishing thing, he says. You don't know where he came from, but he opened my eyes. And we do know that God does not listen to sinners, but God does listen to the one who worships him and obeys his will. And never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were from God, he could do nothing. Preach, blind man, preach. Of course, it gets him driven out of his community, so fair warning. The neighbors, the religious authorities, his own parents decide they don't want to trust his experience because it doesn't match their belief system. Their belief system is more important than his experience of being healed. The story does end with some positive outcomes for the formerly blind man, sort of. He's gained his sight, so that's good. Jesus comes and finds him and gives him an opportunity to make a confession of faith. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Lord, I believe. And friends, that's all we can do. We can't explain away the troubles of the world. We can't explain away the mysteries of faith. We cannot open other people's eyes and turn their heads and say, there he is, look, he's right there. We can't do that. All we can do, everything we can do, what we're called to do, is point to where we've encountered Jesus in our own lives. As I said, in this story, it's not really maybe such a good deal for the man. He loses his friends, his faith community, his family. One thing I do know, he says, I was blind and now I see. It seems like such a simple statement to cause such disruption, doesn't it? Change, though, as we know, is a four-letter word, and when the change is in opposition to people in power, expect trouble. It also reveals the sad truth that the working of Jesus and the truth of the gospel is often at odds with people in power. And I'm not speaking of one political party or one political leader, although you might guess I have opinions. What I'm speaking of is the way power is often self-promoting and self-protecting, and it is not gospel-promoting. I'm speaking of the way we tend to take the power we grab and then use it to harm others while we benefit. As this story in John's Gospel begins, right, as the previous chapter ends, at the end of chapter 8, we're told they picked up stones to throw at Jesus, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. And that's when he finds the man born blind. If the temples we build in God's name are used to throw stones, God will leave the temple. If we want God to be in our temples and sanctuaries and denominations, we have to pay attention to the stones we're hurling at other people in God's name. So as we think about what God is calling us to do and how God is calling us to be in this world, I invite us to remember the different understandings of the word belief. It can be trust in something or someone based on knowledge and experience. I believe the sun will rise tomorrow. It can be a hopeful trust on somebody or something based on mainly optimism and hope. I believe the Warriors will win the NBA championship this coming season. It could happen. It's possible. It can be adherence to a belief system. I believe the only way to God is our way. Or it can be faith in God, the God who created the world, who created us, the God we have never seen and we can never fully commodify or comprehend. And that is what we see in this man's story. Belief systems tend to put up borders and walls to keep the right people in and the wrong people out. My prayer is that American Christianity will spend less time worrying about walls and boundaries and spend more time considering horizons. Horizons are not fixed points. They change as we move. They don't pretend to have the final answer about anything. They just are the limit of what we can see right now from where we're standing. And my horizon is going to look different from where I'm standing than yours is from where you're sitting, because we're not looking in the same direction. What if we're called to gently guide people away from the walls of their own certainty and toward the horizons of God's mystery? The Confession of 1967 begins with this line: "The Church confesses its faith when it bears a present witness to God's grace in Jesus Christ. In every age, the Church has expressed its witness in words and deeds as the need of the time required." It's right there in our confessions. Our horizons change. When belief has been life-giving for me, it's been when people helped me understand faith as a mysterious horizon business. And it's a community job. It's work we each have to do, but we can't do it alone. It's why we're called here, to support each other, to speak of our own experience so that others might possibly just recognize where God is working in their lives too. Because we've all had different instructions in our faith upbringing. Some of us have been pointed to horizons all along, and others of us have been told to build walls. Sarah Bessey is a Christian author, and she had to leave her church in order to follow Jesus. And she's been working really hard to reconstruct her faith. When you see people doing that hard work, by the way, support them, because it's a lot easier just to walk away from faith entirely than it is to reconstruct something. She said that when she was in the beginning stages of her faith deconstruction, her father said this: "I'm not afraid for you. If you're honestly seeking God, I believe you will find what you're looking for, even if it looks different than what I have found." That's faithful horizon work, friends. I've seen God more clearly through the love and care and testimony of others than I have from someone telling me I'm doing church wrong. I once was blind, but now I see, as the song goes. But I see God because of love and not because of judgment. I was just in Dallas this week to take an Enneagram class, and I did get to see my granddaughter while I was there, and that's pretty amazing. But if you had told 20-year-old Marci, as she was about to place her son for adoption, that in 34 years she'd still have a relationship with that son and would get to visit her granddaughter, 20-year-old Marci would not have believed you for 1 minute. It was way too far beyond the horizon of what I could see or imagine at the time. I had hope for good things, but I couldn't see what they would be when I was in the middle of my grief and loss. Not a single one of my dreams was as good as the truth has been. Think about your life. I bet none of us are who we thought we'd be today or where we thought we'd be today from when we were children. Today was way too far beyond our horizon. If our faith has journeyed with us on the way, it has been because of horizons and not walls, right? So all we can do is get out from behind our walls of certainty and journey with others towards God, ever just beyond the horizon. We keep journeying by stages to where God is calling us. We don't know what's beyond the next horizon, and sometimes that is anxiety-producing for us. But we don't need to be afraid. If we're seeking God, we believe we will find what we're looking for, even if it looks different than what we have known. Friends, instead of belief systems that limit your dreams, I hope you'll experience the doubts and the questions and the experiences of belief that will point you into community and ever deeper on the journey by stages, horizon by horizon, so you can see God and so you may believe. Amen.